Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips is hitting back at Elon Musk after he branded her a rape genocide apologist for refusing to fund an inquiry into grooming gangs. The other thing I have is why we keep on just using this term grooming gangs when they're not grooming gangs. The thing is, we've got to understand is that they are rape gangs. And I just think this makes it sound not so bad. Well, they're grooming. They're saying, "Oh, come here, little girl, you're nice, have a sweetie." No, it's not. They raped these children, and we should be saying that. That's what it should be. Anyway.
Well, the Labour politician reacted on a podcast calling Elon Musk ridiculous and accusing him of spreading disinformation. Well,
that is as the Conservatives are expected to bring forward an amendment to the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill for a full inquiry. That's being read today.
But Downing Street is set to whip Labour MPs into voting against it. That's despite the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp calling Labour's decision moral cowardice.
Well, we can now speak to our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Let's go to Charlie. Charlie is out and about touring the country, in areas where there has been awful effects of these gangs. And today, Charlie, it's Rochdale, and you're in Rochdale and you're heading to Rotherham.
Good morning, Eamon and Ellie. Yeah, that's right. We'll be speaking to more survivors and campaigners now in South Yorkshire later today. I will be speaking before I leave Rochdale to another political councillor around here who will urge for the Labour Party to vote for this amendment today. He's now an independent councillor. He has said that it is urgent that a national investigation takes place into this national scandal. But we heard last night from Jess Phillips, who said that Elon Musk's misinformation and the attacks on her had made her at risk, that her security measures had been improved. She also said that she was apoplectic at the slow response to implement child abuse inquiry recommendations. However, survivors around the country, and especially in Oldham, also in Greater Manchester, told me that they were also extremely angry that it took 4 months for Jess Phillips to respond to a letter from Oldham Council urging a public inquiry into their rape gang's travesty. Now, we revealed exclusively last Wednesday that Jess Phillips had rejected that request. She apologised to the council for the very slow response, but she's not apologised to the survivors. Indeed, last night she confirmed that she has yet to speak to a single victim from Oldham on this scandal. So they were asking me last night, how could she so confidently make this decision to turn down an independent investigation into Oldham when she's never met with the survivors here, when they don't know the local intricacies and the issues behind why the survivors and campaigners have called for another government-led review into the town. Well, that stern reaction from those survivors in Oldham comes as the government prepares to vote against a Conservative amendment which would launch a national public inquiry into every town and city where these reports of on-street grooming, rape, abuse and torture gangs have occurred in the United Kingdom. As we understand it, there will be a 3-line whip from Labour on this. Anyone who votes against this amendment, they said, could block their schools bill, which would be a problem for the government's wider agenda, and they will lose the Labour whip if they vote in favour of having that national investigation. Now, the government say that the child sexual abuse inquiry launched by Professor Alexis Jay has already done all of this work. But this morning we've also heard from the former chief reporter of the Times newspaper, Andrew Norfolk, the man who really broke this scandal nationwide in 2011. He said that we still don't understand the origins of this crisis. He also said that Alexis Jay's report shied away from assessing many of those causes. He said that many people still fear being called Islamophobic for getting involved in this sort of discussion. And that comes after the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, on Monday said that people calling for a national public inquiry were jumping on the bandwagon and the poison of the far right, another government intervention that has caused so much anger. Also, as Jess Phillips, the Safeguarding Minister, has defended the government last night, saying that their decision to implement new measures on Monday, with the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper making that emergency statement to the House. Jess Phillips has said that that was not something that she was rushed into, and the government was not rushed into by virtue of the increased attention on this grooming gangs scandal. However, those plans were made, as we've said, as an emergency motion. It only was put forward 3 new policies after all the focus on this issue, after all the focus on how the Labour government has rejected and stood by its rejection of an independent inquiry, not just in Oldham, but nationwide.
Thank you, Charlie, and good luck with your journey today. Good hearing from you. Thank you very much indeed. So, Charlie, keeping the spotlight very much on this. And as we go to Catherine Forster now, who is our political correspondent, Charlie just outlined the politics, the serious politics and the politicking behind all of this.
Yes, good morning, both. Well, it's a week since Charlie Peters broke that story on GB News about the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, refusing that national inquiry. And the consequences of that have been huge, haven't they? Amplified by Elon Musk. But today there will be a vote in Parliament. So what's going on in Parliament today is there is a children wellbeing and schools bill going through the House of Commons. There will be a vote on that. Now, what the Conservatives are doing is they have requested an amendment to that, and the amendment will call for a national statutory inquiry into historic child sexual exploitation focused on grooming gangs. Because remember, of course, the J report was much broader than that. It wasn't only into grooming gangs. There were about 6 towns touched on in that report in terms of grooming gangs or rape gangs. Eamon, as you so correctly say, it sounds much less horrific, in fact, than it actually is, the term that we use. But Charlie Peters' own research for GB News has revealed there's 50 towns, and very significant that Andrew Norfolk, who originally started to unearth this some 20 years ago for the Times, has supported these calls for a national inquiry. Now, what's likely to happen in the Commons is, first of all, it's up to the Speaker whether he will select this amendment. We don't know whether he will. We'll find out late morning. If he does, the Conservatives, of course, will vote for it. That will risk bringing the whole bill down if, of course, Labour didn't have a massive majority in the Commons. They do have a massive majority. This bill will go through. The amendment, if it's picked, will fail. But it's about the Conservatives drawing a line in the sand, putting a marker down, sending a message, and frankly, so that come the local elections or a general election in the future, they will be able to sort of name and shame Labour MPs, saying, look, this MP voted against a national inquiry. I thought it was very interesting what Jess Phillips said last night. It's taken a week to hear from her in public, the woman, of course, at the centre of this storm, a woman who has worked for many, many years to try to crack down on violence against women and girls. But, of course, she is the MP for Birmingham Yardley. There's a large Muslim population in that constituency. Some people do suspect that one of the reasons that Labour don't want this inquiry, beyond it being expensive, is that it will be potentially difficult for them, given that many of their voters are from the Muslim community. Now, Jess Phillips was asked about that last night, and she said that that was absolute rubbish. But I think it's significant that even the Times newspaper, who, as I said, led on this some 20 years ago, did raise that issue and did say that it would be unacceptable for the government to refuse an inquiry because it was worried about the political consequences.
OK, Catherine Forster there for us in Westminster. Thank you very much. Well, commenting on the criticism of Ms Phillips from Elon Musk, the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has said the following, that the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls has dedicated her career to tackling sexual violence and abuse and to being a voice for victims and survivors of the most terrible crimes, including child sexual abuse.
A government spokesperson from the Home Office issued the following. No child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation, and it is paramount that we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we are working at pace across government to drive forward real action to implement the recommendations of the independent inquiry.